Greetings. Welcome to this webinar, A Climate Dashboard Lifts Off. My name is William Moss. I'm the Executive Director of the International Vaccine Access Center. We're in the Department of International Health here at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, and our mission is to create a more equitable world free from adverse health, economic, and social consequences of vaccine-preventable diseases, and we're hosting this webinar today. I'm delighted to open the webinar by introducing Beth Blauer, the Associate Vice Provost for Public Sector Innovation at Johns Hopkins University. Beth co-founded the Centers for Civic Impact and has spent her career improving people's lives by bringing data into government decision-making processes. You may also know Beth, as I do, for her instrumental role in launching and maintaining the data that drove the Johns Hopkins University Coronavirus Resource Center. The Johns Hopkins COVID Dashboard was a pioneering data tool that governments around the world turned to for decisions on how to manage and track the pandemic. The university's iconic COVID Dashboard was a fixture in countless TV broadcasts and offers a framework for large-scale public health data collection and reporting. And it is this dashboard which inspired today's discussion topic. How can we use data-powered digital storytelling to raise awareness about the climate impact of the university's business travel footprint? Thank you for being here to learn more about the climate impact of air transportation and innovative data-driven storytelling approaches. I welcome Beth Blauer to provide additional framing about today's event. Beth?
Thank you so much, Dr. Moss, for the warm introduction and for having me on today's webinar. I'm thrilled to be here. Today, I'm just going to talk a little bit about why dashboards have been so important to my work and how I've sort of positioned dashboards in the middle of instigating public change. And working backwards from COVID. So maybe it's best to start from the very beginning, where I think I built my very first dashboard in the state of Maryland, where we set out an ambitious agenda to really change the way that Marylanders held government accountable, to move the needle on big, meaty areas like less hungry children, less maternal fatalities, less crime, a healthier Chesapeake Bay. All of these and many more, including lots of sustainable research and understanding of how the government can move the needle on things like transit-oriented development, reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, were all done. And we were able to move the needle because we created an internal dashboard that tracked every investment we were making as a government and the impact it was having on outcomes that were measurable and that were defined by a set of metrics that were uniformly adopted by all of the stakeholders around the table who were doing that work. And we were successful in doing that to the point where we had brought the Chesapeake Bay to a healthy tipping point, where we had the #1 schools, where we brought crime down to violent lows. But it wasn't just because we put up a dashboard. It's because we built up a habit around that dashboard of discussing the data, understanding the dynamics of the data, and how the data really defined what we were doing from a public perspective in our government. Fast forward to the COVID dashboard, we use the same kind of understanding. This was by far the largest data dashboard that I ever had worked on, or the team had ever worked on, with over 1 billion users of the data and coming to the site. But again, it was the same fundamental work, which was bringing the data to the center of the conversation, but layering it with those habits and the expertise of trusted public health advisors, of medical advisors, of people that understood dynamically how the data aligned to outcomes and were able to provide advice from everyone, from people who were deciding whether to go to the grocery store to people who were trying to innovate and create vaccines and to do really important scientific work during the pandemic. And so all I'm doing today is just sort of framing that. This isn't just about how do you put together a dashboard, but it is how do you take data and actually bring it into the center of work that you're doing to move the needle and to have an impact. And so I hope that this discussion gets us closer to that, and I'm really excited to join you. So as my next act, I need to hand over the mic to Julian Goresko. Julian is the Director of Climate and Sustainability for JHU. He leads our university's efforts around our university's efforts on the Office of Climate and Sustainability. He brings over a decade of experience working in higher ed. He was a staff member at the University of Pennsylvania before joining Hopkins, where he managed university-wide sustainability planning and engagement programs. Julian, over to you.
Thank you, Beth. It's good to see you all today, and I appreciate the introductions. I'm going to kind of kick things off today with a little bit of an overview on some of our institutional commitments to sort of frame the conversation and provide you with some sort of context on what's happening at the university related to our climate action and sustainability plan, which has just been rolled out recently. So I see a lot of familiar faces in the room, which is great, and a lot of folks I don't know too. So hopefully we'll all have a chance to kind of build off of the opening comments from today. So for those of you that are unaware, the Johns Hopkins University has been undergoing a multi-year sort of planning endeavor, which all recently culminated in the launch of a new 10-year framework under a plan called our Climate Action and Sustainability Plan. It's a lot of the targets in this plan are anchored around 2030 with global climate goals, but also are intended to bring us into the next decade and beyond. This has been developed extensively through, multitude of engagement activities, town halls, webinars, workshops, and the culmination of all of that feedback really shaped the outcome of this plan. The overarching vision are things that are probably near and dear to many of you here at Hopkins, which are around building a healthy, just, and sustainable future at the local and global scale. And I just want to say that both here within the university, but also at the broader sort of local and state level, our framework is now integrated into the Hopkins 10-for-1 strategic plan. But also you might be aware that Maryland has passed climate legislation, the Climate Solutions Now Act of 2022. And so what we are doing at the institutional scale has a significant both ripple effect institutionally across the state and will be critical to how we meet the state's goals and help support those endeavors. Next slide. So the plan is broken into 5 sections, 9 goals, and 24 objectives. I'm going to focus on just a handful of these today, but just in terms of orientation and framing, the 5 sections of the plan are start with research, teaching, and scholarship, which are really around our research and our teaching missions. The subsequent 4 sections are more closely around what you would typically see in an institutional sustainability plan, which is around environmental stewardship and operations. We really felt like for a framework based on the identity of Johns Hopkins and our sort of stature and reputation around research and scholarship, that really had to be a piece of this. And we have been really pleased to be able to bring together sort of our operational and academic endeavors under a single framework. So the subsequent 4 sections are on climate action, both mitigating emissions, which we're going to talk about today, but also adapting to climate change and building for resilience, our built and natural environments, responsible consumption encompassing waste, procurement, food systems, really upstream and downstream, and then mobility and transportation. Next. We're going to talk about emission scopes today. So just really quickly, I just want to make sure in terms of ensuring we're all on the same page as an audience. I'm going to share with you a little bit more about what the university has been committing to around our scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. Scope 1 being direct emissions that we're combusting on our campuses through the use of fuels. Scope 2 being those that we're purchasing. You purchased utilities, heating, cooling, and electricity. And then particularly for today's purposes, Scope 3 emissions, which is a very rapidly accelerating area of data tracking and reporting related to organizational value chain activities upstream and downstream. So we're going to obviously be focusing today around air travel, but Scope 3 is the most arguably complex and largest area of emissions. And what is one organization's Scope 3 emissions is another organization's Scope 1. It gets a little complicated, but we're excited to get into this today. You can go to the next slide. In terms of our climate commitments within our plan, we have an overarching goal to boldly act to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We've named this a climate action and sustainability plan to really lead with climate and emphasize the need to mitigate emissions and address the climate crisis. And then we have a multitude of objectives that underpin this overarching goal, including a commitment to achieve net zero Scope 1 and Scope 2 greenhouse gas emissions by 2040, accelerate decarbonization and energy efficiency in our existing buildings, which is really critical and at the top of the carbon hierarchy around just reducing before transitioning. And then lastly, around establishing a Scope 3 greenhouse gas reduction initiative. Next. In terms of where we are now as an institution, you can see on the left is our baseline emissions inventory from 2022, which has been updated from our historic baseline going back to 2008. About 60% of our emissions come from Scope 2 or purchased utilities. Around 40% come from Scope 1, those fossil fuels we combust on site. And we've seen a tremendous amount of progress going back to 2008 when the university started tracking emissions. In 2009, the university set a goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 51% by 2025 for Scopes 1 and 2. A landmark solar agreement contract was signed in 2019, resulting in the construction of the largest renewable energy agreement in the state, and 175 megawatt new solar facility that we purchase about 80% of our electricity from, about 60% if you include our lease portfolio. All of this helped really drive down emissions reduction. We now have reduced our emissions around 57% against our historic baseline and exceeded our 51% goal 23 years earlier than 2025. And I don't have time to get into it today, but I just want to flag for you that if you're interested in this, you can go to sustainability.jhu.edu. You can look at our plan, and you can read more about our pathway to net zero emissions, including some of the wedges on the right that sort of call out the different strategies to achieve these goals. Next. So I'm going to wrap up today and just reinforce around the connection between the project we're talking about in the university's campuses and living lab program. I'd be remiss to not acknowledge that Hopkins program comes on the heels of many institutions which have taken this leap ahead of us, and we've been able to really benefit from learning from what other organizations have been doing. But the bedrock of what a campus's living lab program is, if you look across the country, is really the concept of using our physical campuses as learning tools for research and education that bring together our missions around research and academics under a single program umbrella. These have been developed over a multi-year period through the Sustainability Leadership Council and the Office of Climate and Sustainability. The aim is really that projects that we collaborate on around this program are helping work towards solutions that we've said we want to accomplish as part of our climate action and sustainability plan commitment. There are grants available through the program on an annual basis, up to $50,000, with a range of funding thresholds depending on students and faculty. And we funded 10 projects this year as part of the inaugural year, including this project you're going to be hearing more about today. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Shima Hamidi. Shima is the director of the Center for Climate Smart Transportation and a Bloomberg Assistant Professor of American Health. Dr. Hamidi is a transportation planner and smart growth advocate. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the introduction, Julian. I'm Shima Hamidi, and I'm happy to share a little bit today about the research we are doing and the work we're doing in our Center for Climate Smart Transportation, which is funded by U.S. Departments of Transportation, a multi-university center, really the intersection of public health, transportation, and climate change. Extremely relevant to this dashboard, and I look forward to collaboration opportunities. Next, please. So let me start with this fact that transportation accounts for about a third of CO2 emissions in the US, more than any other sector. It ranks #1. Used to be number 2 just a few years ago, but it's just the amount of greenhouse gas emissions and CO2 emissions from transportation sector is just significantly, exponentially increasing over time. Next slide. And as you see from the slides, driving is a big part of that, air transportation for sure, but the amount of driving that we've been doing has been also exponentially increasing. And population growth is just responsible for only a quarter of that. A big part of that is because we are living in places that requires long commutes. We have to drive pretty much everywhere we want to go. There are not really much opportunities for other transportation options, which as a result, again, it makes transportation the number one producers of greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide. And it comes with consequences. I want to highlight some of the health consequences of such transportation pattern and lifestyle. The lack of opportunities for physical activity, lack of access to healthy foods, traffic safety, and the higher risks of traffic crashes and fatalities that we have when driving more, air pollution, and the level of stress and isolation that we have, the lack of social interactions just because waiting for a long time on traffic congestions and driving long distances and for long hours. And they all come up with health impacts, cancer, cardiovascular disease, obesity, and its other associated chronic diseases, injury and fatality from crash, the higher rates of crash, and mental health issues, which all together leads to lower life expectancy compared to other countries, developed countries that we have. In many of these, health impacts, the US is doing not as good as other countries. We have higher number of obesity and diabetes than any other developed countries. We have higher numbers of injury and traffic fatalities than any other developed countries. And so we have to do something about that. Next slides. And that's really what's the mission of our Center for Climate Smart Transportation, to go beyond scientific merits and focus on impactful, practice-ready, and evidence-based research. These are the criteria for every single project we select in our center, and we fund in our center, and we execute in our center. It's, as I mentioned, is a consortium of universities, MIT, University of Utah, Morgan State, University of Texas at Austin, and Diné College, which is a tribal community college, are partnering with Johns Hopkins Universities in this center. I should mention that this is the first time in the history of awarding these kind of centers by US DOT, in more than 40 years history of this program, that a School of Public Health is getting one of these centers. So US DOT is very excited about this. We are extremely excited about this and all the projects and opportunities that will come as a result of these collaborations. Next, please. These are our focus areas. So we're trying to focus on different dimensions and aspects that connect transportation to climate change and public health. We are focusing on policy and how to help with, again, modal shifts and changes in travel behavior. We are focusing on technology and how we can help with mass market adoption of electric vehicles and alternative fuels. Community engagements and community-centered solutions to environmental justice, and technology is a big part of our work. Smart cities and innovation and adaptation and mitigation technologies. All of them are, again, is possible because of this consortium that we've put together. We have about $10 million over the next 1 year. The center is 1 year old, so and the whole life of the center before we go for renewal is 5 years. So we have $8 million for the next 4 years to really focus on these dimensions and focus areas. Next slide, please. So I want to highlight a couple of projects that we've done so far. This project that is MIT is leading, MIT Sensible Lab is bringing a different perspective to air quality challenges of transportation. Most research projects that look at air quality, they're looking at place of residence. But this project is arguing that place of residence is not giving us a full picture. People are traveling, people are commuting to get from point A to point B. And during their trip, they experience exposure to air pollution from transportation. And we have to capture all of that in order to be able to quantify air pollution impacts of transportation. And that's what they did. We're talking about big data, 40 million cell phone data, tracking people's travel and their exposure to air pollution during their trip, as well as their place of residence and place of work. And they found that, as you would expect, the overall picture, air pollution from transportation is much higher than, I think they focus on PM 2.5, much higher than what we thought based on the place of residence. And it varies by income level. So for people in lower income distribution or groups, their exposure is much higher because they have to drive longer distances or commute longer distances. And they typically have jobs that requires them to frequently commute. They can't work remotely. And so you will see disparities by location, disparities by income, and really what transportation could bring in terms of air pollution and air quality impacts for different groups. Next slide, please. The other research, this one is also led by MIT, talks about solutions. The concept of 15-minute city is one solution that has been studied, and really, I think European countries are the ones that are trying to implement that. And it really focuses on the fact that the journey to reduce the carbon footprint begins with the choice of transport. And picture a city where all essential needs are within a 15-minute walk. This neighborhood in Boston, for example, 69% of people's travel are within this 15 minutes walk. Of course, that's not generalizable to the entire US. You can see on average, less than a third of people's travel are within this circle, and in different cities is much less, especially those that don't have good proximity of destinations together. This has a lot of implications for campuses. If you want people to travel less and have a less carbon footprint, you have to make sure to include jobs close to housing, close to other destinations, supermarkets, people's daily destinations, in order to be able to achieve this 15-minute city concept. Next slide, please. The other focus of our center is on empty spaces, parking areas. Again, very relevant to campuses like JHU and other university campuses, how we can best use these footprints to turn them into environmental friendly places while also providing parking, but how to really maximize these spaces. Again, is another research that is important, very, very relevant and not much studied. Next slide, please. Public transit, another solution. One of the studies that we've done, JHU led, shows that in Portland, for example, the opening of a new transit line has led to 14% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. And so really helping people to switch from driving to other modes. for commuting. Let it be public transit or shuttle in case of university campuses, or other types of public transit that can help them not to drive are important components of sustainability and reducing greenhouse gas emissions from transportation, surface transportation. Next slide, please. Finally, I want to just show you this another research that we've done in collaboration with Bloomberg American Health Initiative, led by JHU, our team, narrowing lanes and saving lives, looking at how to best optimize the use of our streets, not only for cars, but for also other users of streets, for pedestrians, for cyclists, adding bike lanes, places that we can narrow lanes, use the existing infrastructure to add more bike lane and sidewalk facilities for pedestrians and cyclists, and help people, again, to switch from driving to other modes. I've talked to many JHU faculty and staff, and many of them have told me that they would like to be able to bike to school in terms of instead of driving. And that's exactly what we need to provide. We need to provide our street network is supportive of such options for our staff, faculty, and students. Next slide, please. And so these are examples of projects that we are doing at Center. We have a massive infrastructure in terms of data, transportation data, commuting data, air pollution. And again, in collaboration with our partners, we would be happy to explore opportunities for collaborations and really helping with putting this dashboard together. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Hamidi. It was really fantastic to hear about the new center at the Bloomberg School. I'm Rose Weeks. I'm a DRPH student and faculty member at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School in the Department of International Health. And I'll just be briefly providing some transition remarks before we hear from our colleagues from MIT about their dashboard for business travel. So first, I wanted to acknowledge the Campus as a Living Lab program. We're just so grateful to be able to have this discussion today and have this platform to engage with Scope 3 emission sources and sort of discover solutions collaboratively with our colleagues. We'll be working to create a dashboard visualizing emissions from university business travel to raise awareness, inform strategies, and suggest opportunities to mitigate the associated greenhouse gas emissions of the business travel. And this was a picture from an event that we had, I believe it was last month or maybe October, to announce the program. Next slide, please. Earlier, as part of my DRPH practicum, I worked with an undergraduate student called Roya Mansour to do a landscape analysis of what the policies and practices of our peer universities are in the realm of Scope 3, which is a very large and complicated type of greenhouse gas emissions, as Julian touched upon. Of those peers that we studied, about 2/3 of them track at least a portion of Scope 3 emissions, and it is very, very large and complicated. We'll show some of the examples on the next slide. So the most common type of Scope 3 emissions tracked by peers was school-sponsored air travel or business travel. And so that was the one we decided to look more into. Next slide, please. And so as part of my practicum, we did a key informant interview series with leaders at about 5 of our academic divisions within Johns Hopkins, from the Krieger Arts and Sciences, Bloomberg School, Whiting School, APL. We asked, what are the most appropriate ways to engage with scope 3, and specifically air travel emissions. And so some of the examples, were discussed of those that our peers are working on, including the dashboard. And that was really the one that got the most excitement from our colleagues as part of our conversations. Next slide, please. The climate dashboard for business travel at JHU has a few key objectives that are listed here at left in the blue box. It's setting out to first communicate the climate emissions impact of business travel to faculty and administrative leaders. Second, enable a holistic accounting for a portion of scope 3 emissions. And 3, foster an enabling environment for mitigation efforts to address scope 3, which will follow on later and be driven by faculty priorities. The roadmap for doing this work with the dashboard really starts with using human-centered design strategies to harness the ingenuity of our faculty, staff, and students at Johns Hopkins. These individuals recognize very well the careful balance and trade-offs, for instance, how travel to create knowledge, build relationships, and disseminate learning is often essential and irreplaceable. And we invite everyone in this discussion today to sign up to design the dashboard. And we'll be sharing more about that in the next second session after the preview of the MIT dashboard. You'll hear from my colleague, Dr. Daniel L. Lee, who's a human-centered design specialist. You can hear more about how you can sign up to participate in the design workshops. Thank you so much. I think the next step after this is to introduce our speakers. So really super excited to have two colleagues from the Office of Sustainability at MIT on with us today. We have Brian Goldberg, who is the Office of Sustainability Director, and we have his colleague, Yu Chen, a sustainability data scientist. And I think there's a lot to say about what you all have accomplished, but I'll just turn it over to you so you can give a preview of that itself. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rose. It's great to be with this group. Institutionally, just hearing the other presenters, it's clear that MIT and Johns Hopkins share so much in terms of our commitment to grounding our work in data and science. I felt like I'm here among MIT colleagues, though these are all Johns Hopkins colleagues. So it's a very easy group to blend with. On a personal level, I am from a very long line of Hopkins Blue Jays. My grandfather was class of 38. My dad was class of 69. My cousin was class of 08. And I was not smart enough to join all of you, but it's nice to present and walk through this example with all of you. So I think just to kick this off, at MIT, we don't have the answers. We're just like you all as colleagues sharing some approaches we've tried, and we're really keen to learn from you, and maybe there's something you can learn from us as well, and we can all advance. So in the MIT Office of Sustainability, our commitment is we see our work across multiple scales. In this frame of business travel, air travel, this is a global challenge. We're working with individuals, and we're also operating at the scale of a campus. So we're crossing all of these scales with this kind of work. The advantage is it enables engagement across multiple scales. And it enables, as Julian was talking about the campus as a living lab, this work enables individuals to actually make a difference at the campus, city, and perhaps even global scale, depending on how they engage in this work. Julian showed one graph or image showing scope 1, 2, and 3, and this is really just how emissions are categorized according to some international protocols. At MIT, we use this diagram. It essentially describes that scope 1 and 2 is the power we generate and the power we purchase. And we have a commitment through our climate action plan similar to yours. We have to hit some net zero goals by 2026, so we're just around the corner. And then scope 3, we have a commitment to account for our scope 3 emissions. Everything from the materials that make up our buildings to the travel from our air emissions. Generally, we're still continuing to refine our understanding of the scope. Generally, scope 3, it's about 65% of the whole pie. And scope 1 and 2 is about 35%. So scope 3 is much bigger than our scope 1 and 2. And yet, as Julian said, there's so much complexity in trying to understand scope 3 and then figure out what to do about it. Across higher ed, I'm curious if Johns Hopkins is using a similar set of categories. We've drawn from the International Greenhouse Gas Protocol to identify these, I don't know, maybe it's 7 or 8 categories on the left that are relevant to higher education in terms of categories that we as higher education have some responsibility for in our operations. And these are the categories where then have begun a process of accounting for over the past few years. Why are we actually accounting for this work? It's primarily it's transparency. It's to say that, well, we're responsible, even though these emissions involve purchasing activities, purchasing a water bottle or purchasing a computer or purchasing a plane ticket. There's still a role that we play as an institution in influencing the release of those emissions. If we didn't purchase those, or we purchased differently, fewer emissions might be released. This accounting activity is also about triage. We use the term triage to mean it's getting an estimate across Scope 3 emissions to say, where do we focus our time and energy? Where might we actually be able to make a difference? And then what's really exciting in this work is because so many in our community as students and faculty are saying, I want to engage in climate action. What can I do? Well, Scope 3 is all kinds of opportunities for understanding, for educating, for researching, for engaging. So there's just a ton of opportunity to activate our own campuses as living labs through the analysis work and the emissions reductions. So those are many of the reasons why we're accounting. Business travel, as it's called in the protocol, it simply refers to all the travel that MIT pays for and reimburses. That travel represents, it's about 9% of our whole emissions pie, or another way to look at it is most of the focus of greenhouse gas emissions inventories is Scope 1 and 2. And travel accounts for about 25% of our kind of primary emissions, but travel is counted as part of Scope 3. So it's a significant amount of emissions. This chart starts to get a little deeper, and I think what's most important here is, as we've been trying to understand over the last few years, so if we focus on business travel, what could we actually do about it? And so wherever you see the word high in bold, well, that means those are areas where we think there's the most leverage. So we think with travel, individuals have a very high ability to leverage. Do they travel or not? So do departments. But as we move down the list, the institution itself has a little bit less leverage to really guide and direct individual travel, at least at MIT. It may be different in other institutions. But as we look across some of the other Scope 3 categories, there are roles for the institutions, such as in purchased goods and in capital construction, the actual materials we're using to build our buildings. The institution can make some changes that are much harder for individuals to influence in terms of how a building is designed. As we get into business travel, the focus of supporting this project here today, we see 3 key steps that we've been using, which is really data, reporting, and action. And with data, it's figuring out, well, what data can we report about business travel? How do we convert our travel to emissions? And we've partnered with our data providers on campus, our finance office, to use one approach. We've also leapfrogged. We've learned from many other schools so that we're not wasting our time. We've learned from them. Maybe we've hopped over them. I hope you all can learn from us. This has taken us a few years to get to this point. Hopefully you can take a few months and just hop way past us. And then we've looked at how do we put a dashboard together, and then what kind of actions, at least with business travel, might begin to be possible. And there's a lot of good examples and practices out there. As part of our process, we've actually developed this document on the right. It's not yet available on our website, but we'll be posting it probably in January. We're trying to open source all of our methods, not just for business travel, but actually across all of these Scope 3 categories we're tracking, because we think it's really important to help others understand what assumptions are we using, and then take those same methods, apply them at your own school, refine them, leap ahead of us. We have a sense of urgency about the work. For business travel, we focus on travel that is paid for by MIT or reimbursed by MIT, whether it's student, staff, or faculty. And we've used approach that's spend-based. So once you get into the weeds on this, some people say, well, the most accurate way to estimate travel is what size plane and how much of the seat did someone take up on the plane in terms of a business class or first class or economy. But that requires a lot of data. And it's data that's not accounted for in our systems. But what's accounted for at MIT is when someone travels and MIT pays for it, they fill out a reimbursement. And those dollars go through a reimbursement channel. So we've used dollar spend because that captures our whole pool of travel. And it's a much broader capture of the picture of travel than any other data that's available. When this is again a more complicated chart, but in the third column over, it's really important when trying to get our heads around scope 3, what data is one going to use? And with business travel, we're using what has been spent in terms of dollars, and we're converting it to emissions using a US EPA calculator, an economically extended input-output model. And we're also using spend data for some other scope 3 categories like purchasing and like the construction of our buildings across all of campus. So these are, again, high-level data sets that give us an estimate of impact. They don't give us a much more precise understanding of life cycle assessment, but it gives us a starting point. So our goal a year and a half ago for putting up a business travel dashboard was to communicate an understanding of the impact itself. People have been traveling at MIT for years. Now we're starting to account for it. We want to make that information available to the community. We want it to be credible data. And our hope has been that that might catalyze action by the community, perhaps at the individual scale, the department scale. And we want this data to be able to be reproducible. So my colleague Yu is just going to walk through what does our business travel dashboard currently look like? And then I'll just close with 1 or 2 slides. Is it this one? Yeah, here. So Yu is our data scientist, and he'll walk through this.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for giving me this opportunity. I will walk you through this business travel dashboard we put up about a year ago. Yeah, so what you're seeing here is now our data pool is a collection of our dashboards, and business travel is here. Yep, and let's skip the first 2 that Brian already presented. So we're starting from this annual total trends of this business scope 3 emissions, and also we have parameter selection for different meters, say this total spending dollars. As Brian said, this is spending based estimates. And we have different travel modes. That's how we got emission factors, and we can calculate the emissions. And so as you can see now, for our fiscal year 24, which ends in July this year, and it's almost climbing back up to the pre-pandemic level. Yeah, and we also have different measures like percentage totals for different mode. And let's walk on to different views. This one is showing the breakdown by different modes and how they're spending and the emissions compared to each other. And it's very intuitive. We're seeing air travel is the most impactful travel mode, and accommodations comes to the second. And we can select different fiscal years. And the last one, which usually is our the first step, we try to engage in different departments. So we see the total emission breakdown by different departments. And as you can see here, School of Engineering is the top, and the management comes to a second. And we also have in-house different views breakdown into more detailed DLC, as we call it. This is school level, but we can break down into more detailed versions, which is not showing in the public facing dashboard. Yeah, and as Brian said, this is very much a work in progress, and we have different directions to improve. One potential would be using finding the more like accurate emission factors, or like starting our exercise, like doing the process-based or like distance-based estimates. But that's work is coming up. I will pass back to Brian.
Thanks, you. So that gives you a flavor of the dashboard. And then in terms of now that we've accounted for this, well, what happens now? Well, over the last year, we've put up a website that provides a series of guidance for people to consider when making decisions about their travel. Is it necessary to travel? Can you limit the travel? And eventually the sort of last option becomes, if someone has to travel, we've created an option and a pilot program for offsetting that travel. This is a website you're welcome to visit, which provides guidance specifically about our travel options in terms of offsetting, and covers some of our questions around the offsets or offset provider, how that works. I think we'll acknowledge that over the last year, we've had a pilot for a handful of departments and schools. There's been no concerns or no risks that have been raised about this offset program, other than people have expressed curiosity and interest. Our offset provider is Climate Vault, which attempts to lock up government permitted emissions and retire those emissions. We've now opened this to the whole campus. And it's stimulated some encouragement among some departments. A few departments have said, okay, we see our travel emissions now, and we want to have our junior faculty travel more because they really need to travel. And we want to have our senior faculty travel less because they don't really need to travel as desperately as the junior faculty. So some departments have started to shift their own travel behavior, and we think this dashboard has helped to inspire and ground some of those activities. There's some more information on our website about this one offset provider, but I want to acknowledge that offsets are it's a controversial topic. The MIT community is not at all united on this. It's simply one of a number of options, and you're welcome to read more about this on our website. At the same time, I'll close on this slide. It's really an all of the above approach. We've had a great week in terms of some big climate action from at least MIT. On the left, this is an attempt on campus. We've just completed 4 new solar projects on a few of our buildings. And then on the right, we've just announced it's a massive consortium with a number of other schools and hospitals in the Boston area to bring online a significant amount of solar in terms of a new solar facility in Texas and a new wind facility in North Dakota. And what this model shows that we think is important is the power of collaboration and consortium. We compiled multiple partners together to leverage our dollars together and enable a number of institutions to group purchase for renewable energy and bring these facilities online. So we think as Scope 3 starts to build out our accounting and our potential options of what's next, working together with our partners is proving to be a really valuable way to make some change. So I'm going to leave it there in the interest of time, and hand it back, I think, to Daniel. Is that right?
Yep. All right, so maybe while I wait for Andrew to help share the screen, I just get started. First to say thank you so much, Brian, and you for sharing your experience. We're willing to share your experience, the collaboration we began. We started before this meeting, and then we'll also continue with the collaboration so that we can, share ideas, learn from you, and also you also hear from us. Thank you so much. And then I think we have also heard what the position is, the JHU position in terms of climate action, as well as the sustainability plan that we have in place. So I'm Dr. Daniel Ali. I'm going to be the PI. I'm the PI for this project. First, I want to appreciate the Office of Sustainability that's coordinating the Campus as a Living lab program. for this opportunity you're giving to us with Rose to come up with a travel dashboard for working together with colleagues, come up with a travel dashboard, by tracking and encouraging sustainable travel, talking about the business travel. And so I will not go through the purpose because this was taken through, Rose took us through the purpose. And so we feel that one of the approach that we want to apply to design this business travel dashboard is the human-centered design approach. Why the human-centered design approach? Because most times interventions that are designed by people who do not use or implement those designs. So it ends up not being used because they don't own it. They don't see themselves as part of the entire process. And again, the human-centered design approach also tries to address the issue of empathy. So you try to also bring in the lived experiences, the limitations that the implementers are passing through already now in the design, so that ultimately you're going to have something that is going to be sustainable. Good for us that we have MIT has something, and so we're going to build upon what MIT has in terms of trying to prototype it. So if we have to prototype it, how do we do it? So to achieve that, we'll bring what we call the personas, different people who we think for now are going to be the users, are going to be the implementers. So we intend to invite the heads of the centers, some of the centers or the departments, the technical officers that travel a lot, for missions, and then also the administrators or the procurement officers. So these are the category of people that we want to have in this workshop, and then hear from them. The whole essence is in that we're going to have two sets of workshops. The first workshop is all around trying to hear from these participants on how might we use the climate dashboard to achieve positive change at JHU. How might we adapt the MIT climate dashboard here at JHU? And then how might we ensure widespread use of the dashboard for the faculty and administrative managers across the university? So the first workshop is going to help us answer this question among several other questions that we have. And then the second question, by the time we come, second workshop, by the time we come to second workshop, we will have designed, have a dashboard, based on the input we got from this first workshop. And then we'll call key persons to go through this dashboard and then look at it, assess the dashboard, and provide feedback in terms of its usability. And so that is what we intend to achieve. And then we're hoping that this workshop will come up in January, for now, tentatively January, and then we'll do that. So this is now the link, the QR code, the link to register for this workshop. And so we encourage you to click on this link and then register, because we want to hear from you during the workshop, so that you can, some of the questions again that we also want to hear during the workshop from you is, what are the most carbon intensive emissions, months for JHU? How has the climate impact of travel changed since before COVID and then after COVID? And then what available strategies are there to minimize the emissions associated with the trip? So it's not all about just designing a dashboard, business travel dashboard, but how does it inform action? What will be the strategy? How do we mitigate against some of those high emissions that we're seeing? And so these are the kind of ideas that I want to hear from you during the workshop. And then even after the workshop, it will still continue, and then we'll continue to refine, and then until we have a very robust and sustainable dashboard. So I'll pause at this moment and then call on Rose Weeks to coordinate the discussion. I hope we'll still have time for discussion.
Thanks so much, Dr. Dan. I think we have probably 1 or 2 minutes for discussion, so we just invite the webinar participants to ask any questions you may have, or just go ahead and line up your camera for your phone on the QR code, take a picture, and then navigate to the sign-up sheet for the workshop that Dr. Ali has described. We'd be happy to answer any questions you have. You can also ask your questions in the same form that's here. There's a link and there's also a QR code. So I don't see any questions coming in. Okay, I do maybe see one. Okay, this is a question for the MIT participants. Is there a part of the MIT dashboard that is publicly accessible? I don't think so. Brian?
Yeah, that's the challenge. We appreciate the question. And part of the risk is folks in our leadership said, oh, this dashboard's great. And we'd love it for the 20,000 people at MIT who have Kerberos access through their special codes. But we want to keep it to MIT. So it's not publicly accessible, but the numbers are just the numbers. The methods will be publicly accessible. And you can reach out to me if you'd like to learn more about that.
I think we're at time, but again, we do encourage everyone to continue to engage with this project and sign up if you have a chance. We'll be circulating this information over our Johns Hopkins Sustainability Listserv, and you'll hear about it in hopefully a few other channels as well. So Dr. Ali, did you want to say anything else to close us out?
Yeah, yes. Thanks, Rose. And just also emphasize that the link Andrew has shared, the link is in the chat, so click and then register. First, I really want to thank the panelists, starting with MIT for sharing your experience with us. I want to thank Julian Goresko, Office of Sustainability. I want to thank Shima Hamidi with sharing that opportunity that you have with that we need to CCST. I also want to thank Beth for also taking time to be on the panel, and then William Moss, who also set the stage for us in absentia. Thank you so much. And Rose Weeks, we've been together. Thanks for coordinating, making sure that things have happened. And then to Andrew, thank you so much for organizing the webinar, ensuring everything went smoothly. And then for the participants, we're so excited to have this number. This is large. It started at 57, 58 thereabout, and then it went down. Thank you so much. And then we're hoping that we're going to see all of you or more during the workshop. That is when we're really going to have hands-on, more group discussion, and so that at the end of the day we'll come up with something that we'll all be proud of at JHU. And MIT will also hope to see you then and even afterward. So with that, I think, except if Rose, you have anything you want to add from our announcement, okay. Otherwise, say thank you so much and then have a good evening to all of us.